How's it going, my G's? It's Artifact, and today we're going to do a bit of a producer mindset video. I'm going to talk about some of the tips or tricks that I wish I knew when I started producing. So, not a sound design video today, and hopefully one of these tips or tricks will help one of you guys. I actually went ahead and made some notes this morning when I was like lying in bed, and yeah, I thought of 11 things that I wish I knew when I started producing like 8 or 9 years ago. And yeah, the first kind of five or so are like, or the first half is kind of to do with actual production techniques, and then the other half is to do with more like industry advice. So yeah, stick around because you might learn something. So number one, things I wish I knew when I started producing is mixing into a limiter or mastering chain. This is a big no-no for me because when you like mix down stuff into, I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit of a shadow from the light. When you mix down a track into like a specific mastering chain or limiter, although you're like kind of boosting the sound, you're limited to the way that limiter is boosting the sound, and it's gonna boost all the little details in your track accordingly to how the algorithm of that plugin works. And essentially what you're doing when you're limiting is, although you're kind of like bringing up the volume and squashing everything together, it's making these decisions for you that you could just do yourself in the mix. Like, like it kind of brings up the little details, for example. Well, why can't you have full control of those little details and mix that properly yourself? I think it's like a bit of a shortcut. When I found that I slammed a limiter on my master, everything sounded wow, big and amazing and loud. And it was like shortcutting a loud mix down without putting in the work. So yeah, when I kind of stopped doing that and just put a clipper on my master and just analyze the frequencies and try to get everything into the right spot, my mix down skills just got way better, and it was just no longer important to like smash your master chain with a load of useless plugins. So that's the first tip. The second one is over processing. Is something I always used to do, and I used to think like, how do these producers that I really aspire to get their sound? They must like put so many plugins on. They must like really like have some wicked stuff that I don't. They must like put so much time into putting things on. And I'm working on a track right now, and I've just had to go back and just take off so many plugins that I put on because they just all made everything worse. And although you need plugins to like do some good stuff to a sound, what I see from a lot of producers, and something that I always used to do, is just over process the hell out of everything. And it's all about using the right sound to begin with and putting things in the right place and at the right volume. It's really that simple, and we tend to really overcomplicate things. And it's just, the more you process the sound, essentially you're starting to ruin it. And if you think about the most perfect bass sample or something, although it's been processed, it's already like ready for you, and there's already great samples out there that are like ready to be used. And it's like the more you kind of mess with them or fuck with them, like the worse they become. So over processing is something that I wish that I'd known from the beginning. It's not so important to put so many plugins on a sound. Just get the right kind of combinations of elements. Next one, spending too long on one sound. So this is when you're actually doing your mix down or you're producing the track. When you get really in depth in like this one kind of particular sound, and you get bogged down in it, like layering a snare for like an hour, or trying to make a specific bass for like so long. And I find 15 to 20 minutes is the maximum time you should spend on like one sound. And then if you haven't got quite the result you were desiring, you need to just move on and do something else, and then perhaps come back to it another time and try again. But when you start to spend more than 20 minutes on like one piece of the puzzle, it will never work after that time period. I've found it's just like you have to cut your losses and before you lose motivation, because it's always that kind of balance. Don't spend too long on one sound. Next tip is getting frustrated. So when you're putting in a lot of time and effort, like you're trying to, for example, recreate a certain sound, and you just can't get it right. It's not worked, and you're just feeling frustrated because you didn't get the result that you wanted. I just missed one note actually, but yeah. If you're not getting the result that you wanted and you feel frustrated, but what you have to remember is all that time and energy you put into it, it's not actually gone to waste. Even if you didn't get the quite get the result you wanted, because it's always about trial and error, and because even though you've done something wrong or you didn't get the right result, you have now put that in your mind as, you know, this particular way doesn't work, or this kind of method wasn't the best, and that is just as beneficial to you as getting it right first time. So when people get frustrated because they don't get it right first time, but you can't ever get it right first time, and you have to get it wrong a lot of times, and by getting it wrong you're actually training yourself and you're actually becoming better, so it's not worth getting frustrated over it. You know, it's part of the process. And the other point that I kind of missed was going with the flow. And this is also when it comes to like sound design or making sounds. It's like, rather than, you know, you can set out to try and make a specific sound, but obviously you're never going to, you know, get the exact result you want like most of the time. But it's all about going with the flow of what you're currently creating. So you need to be like present with like what you're doing. You know, if you like mixing certain parameters and you get like a certain cool sound, but it wasn't the one you were after specifically, but it's still good and you still enjoy it, you should just roll with that, and you should go with the flow of like the happy accidents that happen. So you shouldn't like, you can try to start emulating a certain kind of vibe or sound, but if it starts to go in one direction, you should roll with that, because it's you're all the best kind of songs and things are kind of made by accident, and you need to be putting in the time to allow those accidents to happen and then capitalize on them and kind of roll with them when they happen, and not fight against it. So you should be going with the flow of the production, not trying to, you know, be rigid in your approach. So yeah, that's something I used to do a little bit. And then a final kind of production tip before we move on to the kind of mindset and industry advice is mid-side EQing and monoing a sound. I think people put too much importance on whether a sound is mono or stereo. Really, everything should be stereo, and you should just be mid-side EQing to take out the low end in the sides. So the low part of everything below like sort of 80 hertz or something is just naturally in mono, because you take out the sides, and you don't need to overcomplicate things and like try to like listen to everything in mono, you know, like referencing it all in mono. I mean, sure, to a degree, you can use that to make sure you haven't lost the mono signal, but really you want a strong mono signal and a strong stereo signal. The worst thing that you can do is be so obsessed with monoing things and getting the perfect mono sound that you completely neglect your stereo image. So it's not really worth getting too bogged down in it. You just need to think about, you know, have I got the mono in there? Is it stereo as well? And let's mid-side EQ the low end just to take out the sides in the very, very low part. And that's like all you need to really like think about. Don't need to go too much more, like get too much more obsessed with it other than that, you know? Okay, so let's move on to some kind of industry advice. So the first thing is record label opinions. I wish I placed less emphasis on what record labels thought of my music from the beginning, because I used to think that's like the end goal, like the record label. And although it can be great to sign to a record label, at the end of the day, you're giving your music away to someone else, and you've put in a lot of time and effort into this music. Sure, the record label can maybe help you, but at the end of the day, they're they're taking the share of your work, you know. And although, yeah, a lot of record labels have very good ears and good opinions and are well respected, it's not always the case. And I've lost motivation for a certain song I really, really loved because the record label that I was working with, they didn't like it at all. And I thought, okay, it must be shit then. And then I kind of gave up on it. And it wasn't until I re-released it myself like a few years later, and it became one of my like most popular tracks. This was Loophole. And yeah, I kind of just thought, because the label told me it was no good, that it was terrible. But all of my peers liked it. And yeah, so I value, rather than what any particular one record label or person thinks, I value, you know, what my peers think of my music and what I think of it. And I place that at the top of my pyramid of, you know, kind of like seeking validation, I suppose, you know, but I try to seek it from within. You know, do I like the track? And what about my friends and people that I know and that listen to my music? Do they like it? And that's at the top of my pyramid. I don't place people I don't know or other record labels as like the top priority of who's going to validate my song. So I wish I knew that earlier, and I wish I cared more about what I thought and what my friends or my closest peers thought than someone else. Yeah. So the next thing is sharing knowledge. I used to think that if I like knew something about production that was like going to give me an edge, that I should like keep it to myself and use it as an advantage to like get ahead in the game. And this is all just complete bollocks, because it's not actually until I started sharing knowledge that I got better. One, I had to explain things to people, and it made me think about things in a new way by doing that. Two, the feedback I got from sharing knowledge, people the input from them like made me question it and actually improved my knowledge. And yeah, thirdly, it's a great way to build like friendships and community, like by sharing knowledge. So you should definitely not hold back on that like I kind of used to, and I wish I was always just more open and with sharing like production tips and things like that. So yeah, that's sharing knowledge. It kind of ties into the next thing, which is like target audience. So it's not so much about, I don't mean so much about knowing who your target audience is, like what like age, gender, height, or hair color. What I mean is like, if you're just releasing music and like throwing it to the wall and like hoping to get lots of followers and lots of listeners, like that's all well and good, but it's nothing compared to like knowing who's listening to it on like a personal basis. And sure, if you're like super famous and you have like 1 million listeners, it's difficult to know everyone. But if you're not, then you should be at least like knowing who your listeners are. And so I think it's just as important to put out good music and to have lots of listeners as it is to connect with the listener. Like you have to do both, in my opinion. Like especially if you're like an independent artist, there's no other way around it really. And if you're like a lesser known artist, yeah, connecting with the 2, 3, 7, 90 or 1,000 people that do listen to your song is just as important as putting out the song. So don't neglect your audience. That's definitely a super important tip. And yeah, 2 more tips. Inspiration and motivation. I used to think I can't start writing music until I feel inspired or motivated, and then when I do, then I'm gonna start. That's complete bollocks, because you have to be the source of your inspiration and your motivation. You have to do it yourself, and it's a cycle. Motivation, action, and inspiration, they are in a circle. So you can start with action, and it will in turn lead to inspiration and motivation. So you start with action, and the simplest way is just sit down and start working when you don't feel like it, when you're sick, when you're ill, when you can't be bothered. You still sit down and keep working and treat it like a job. And by sitting down, you will allow the Lord to work his magic through you. All right. So it's not a case of waiting for inspiration or motivation is a complete cop out, and it's what lazy people say. And I used to be one of those people, so I can say that to you. So you just have to get on with it and start actually sitting down to work and let the inspiration come that way. Last tip is wanting to be the best. I definitely have had moments of this where it gets you down, because you want to be the best producer, or you want to be, you see it as a competition, and the truth is it's not a competition, because the beautiful thing about music is it's people expressing themselves, and this is who I am, this is what I make. And you can never try to be someone else, because, well, you can try and replicate someone, but then there's no soul in it, because music is an expression of yourself. So just the whole idea of like wanting to be the best is just terrible. So if someone makes some amazing music and you're a bit envious or jealous, you should be using that as inspiration and admiration, and not envy. It's absolutely fine for someone else to have amazing music, and you can also have amazing music which is different and personal to you. And there's infinite amount of different like ideas for music that you can create. So wanting to be the best, something that I used to be a little bit like that, like too competitive, or yeah, I would hear other producers and it would get me down because of how good they were. But at the end of the day, they're just doing their thing, and I'm just going to do my thing, and that's how it should be. And you should just hone into your own like influences and create your own sound, And it's music, it's opinion based, so there is no right or wrong, or there's no better or worse. It's all subjective, so that's just a pointless thing to think about, to be honest. Yeah, well, those are my kind of 11 tips. I can probably think of a lot more, but that's just kind of what I thought of this morning. Hope one of those tips helps one of you. If it does, then I've done my job. And yeah, I'll get back with you guys soon. Peace.